Hey, I'm Philip, and welcome to the Hobby Shop. I'm here with
Aaron, Rob,
Don.
and this week we're going to be talking about comic book movies, or comic books in general. Well, since the first episode we talked about Ninja Turtles, Aaron has now seen the Ninja Turtles movie, and I'm just going to throw it to him, and what do you think of it?
Well, I watched it, went into the theater with a very critical mind about it, as I said I would, and I was blown away by it. I'm going to say it's like the best Turtles movie I've ever seen.
Really?
Yes. The Michael Bay's influence stops at just there being a few explosions and some gunfire, and that's about it. You know, the rest of the movie, the story and everything else draws heavily from the old cartoon, the newer cartoon, the old movies, draws from everything. And in some ways, even the Next Generation that we talked about, or Next Mutation, really. You know, it draws from all of that, brings out the best pieces of each one, and puts them all together. The new storyline is a completely new version of the story, but done in a really good way. I really, really liked it. So
I'm surprised. How was Shredder?
Shredder was awesome, and he's not an American dude. For those of you who think he's an American dude, he's not. He's actually a Japanese dude. Huge Japanese dude with a deep, menacing voice. You never see his face, traditional to the way it's supposed to be. And it was just, he was awesome.
What about the Turtles themselves?
The Turtles themselves, the characters are the way they're supposed to be. They're very, true to themselves. They exaggerate a little bit more, but it's all done in the right ways. So,
Now, you say exaggerated. Now, they didn't. One of my fears was that they was going to make Donatello like overly nerdy and all that, since they gave him glasses and
Yes.
stuff like that.
they did make him overly nerdy, but again, it's all the way he's, it's not, he doesn't do anything out of character that you think he would not do. So, none of the Turtles, none of them do something that you would not expect.
Now, I gotta ask, April O'Neil.
Well, Megan Fox didn't do a horrible job. I'm going to say that. Yes, there could have been a better job done there. That was one of my little minor complaints. She could have done a little bit of a better job, but she didn't do as bad as I thought she was going to do.
Now, did the movie focus on where they needed to focus?
It focused a lot on April's journey to discover the Turtles in the beginning. Once you get to that point where they're kind of unveiled, then the movie changes focus more to the Turtles. It's still got her in it, trying to help them, trying to, save the city, everything else. But it's more about the Turtles then and discovering their origins and everything else, and then them trying to stop this evil plot.
Now, how was like the action scenes, like the fighting and the camera work and all that?
The camera work I liked a lot. It wasn't the typical shaky all over the place where you can't see a damn thing of the fight. It was very focused, very, whip pans to different fight scenes, focus on it for a second, whip pan to another thing. The fight was very fluent, very cool, as far as weapons and martial arts combined, it was great. Of course, they get a little CGI-ish, naturally, but of course, it's cool in the end.
How was Splinter?
Splinter was badass. Splinter is what I've always wanted Splinter to be. Okay, he gets into a fight with Shredder very early on, and he's like just going toe to toe with him. He's like doing all these different tricks. He gets into a fight with a bunch of foot ninjas. He's kicking their ass. He is a badass.
So the foot are ninjas.
They are ninjas. What the masks they wear is kind of like this face mask thing, but they are actually ninjas. They have guns, but they do a lot of martial arts, and they have certain weapons, reflections of the ninja weapons.
Okay, so basically modernized ninjas.
Yes.
Okay, so any criticism?
Probably, I would say there was one scene where Splinter, you think he may be dying. He's been wounded pretty badly, and Raphael is over him, and the rest of the Turtles have been captured. And it could have been this really long, dramatic scene. I love scenes like that, tearjerkers. And they kind of cut it a little short to try to progress the story. It was basically like, don't worry about me, go get your brothers. And then it was like, okay, boom. For me, that was the main thing I thought. It wasn't something that pissed me off in any way. It's just I thought you kind of missed an opportunity to really pull people in and get them attacked by doing that. But again, there is the other point of view that it's like, well, it's sensei giving you an order. You don't argue with your sensei. Still, in my opinion, Raph is the rebellious one, and he should have been like, no, I need to help you. This and that. So, of course, this is not a spoiler. All this is in the previews for any of you that have not. So, all in all, if I was going to rate the movie with a 1 to 10, I would give it a full 10. Really? Honestly, yes.
Better than the original.
Better than the originals.
I gotta ask though, any Casey Jones?
Not yet. I was really hoping he was going to be in it, but he wasn't. But there was Vernon from the old cartoon in it.
Really?
Yes. He's not as dorky and kooky as the old Vernon, but he still is really dorky and kooky.
Is he still a dick?
Yes.
Okay, that's the
He's
thing.
still after April, you know, all the
Still.
stuff like Gilbert. And the funny thing they did play up in this movie is the little subplot that is always in Turtles, but they never really do it a lot, is Michelangelo's huge crush on April O'Neil.
Okay.
So,
Well, yeah, you kind of, I don't know what to think now. You kind of threw me off. I didn't expect the movie to be good.
actually, surprisingly, as I said, it was an amazing movie, I gotta say. The director really saved it from Michael Bay, who was going to completely fuck it up. And it's just this amazing movie now.
Alright, just a side note, I finally saw the fan film Casey Jones.
Mhm.
And that one's really good, and I kind of want I want that to be a movie now.
It'll be interesting.
Well, so moving on from there, let's get into the main theme of the show, comic book movies. Now, I think the majority of this would be probably me and Aaron, but just to see where everybody's at. Don, where are you on comic book movies?
Like at most, it's probably either 3 or 4. You know, like let me think. The first one I've probably seen was Watchmen. That was probably the first comic book movie I ever saw, and I think like after that was probably Avengers, then The Dark Knight, and well the fourth one I don't know if you really would count it as a movie, more like an interactive movie, The Walking Dead. These are adaptations from the game. I heard a lot of people consider them movies, or some people consider them games.
I can see that point. And what about you, Rob?
It's about all the same. I watched Watchmen, Dark Knight, and it's not really much to say.
Now, I started off with, I think the very first one I saw, which is, it's hard to say. I guess the very first one I ever saw was the original Ninja Turtles movie, if you count that. Yeah, I guess that would work.
Yeah, it was originally comics.
Yeah, beyond that though, I'd say at least the first one I knew was I didn't know about Ninja Turtles being a comic book when I first saw that movie. First one I knew was a comic book movie was Blade. What about you, Aaron?
I've been watching comic book movies since I was a little kid. I mean, it started probably with the Turtles movie, as you said. And, I knew that as being a cartoon movie. I didn't even know it was a comic book at that point, And then it just continued on from there, I watched all the normal ones, as you said, Blade, Spawn, which, as a movie, honestly, is not that bad, but when you actually compare it to the comics, it's like, sucky. It is it presents itself in a very good way, and it's much truer than some of the later comic book movies, but they really didn't have the effects to be able to do a lot of what they should have been. And then just pretty much most of the rest of the comic book movies I've watched, because, comic books, my brother was into them huge when he was in his teens, and so when I was a little kid, he would always tell us stories about these characters, And it was a way for me and him to bond about it, So I would know all this stuff, we'd play games together, comic book heroes, and so on.
Now, it's kind of weird how comic book movies have kind of became like that guaranteed success in the movie theater. Where do you think that started?
I know Iron Man was a really big trend because a lot of people were talking about, but I think also maybe Batman too, Spider-Man.
Now, which Batman are we talking about here? We're talking about the old Michael Keaton Batman and Christian Bale Batman.
I think like the recent is because I haven't heard anyone back then talk about the old movies. Everyone's always talking about the new ones.
Mm-hmm.
You always hear people talk about The Dark Knight. You see a lot of parodies of it. You never really see parodies of any of the old stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I really want to say the trend kind of started around that time.
Nothing from Rob. I would say this is not really when like this whole crazy boom started, but this is when these movies started to prove to be commercial successes. And I would say that the beginning of that was Blade. That most people didn't know it was based on a comic book, but this was probably the first time people saw a superhero movie at that era, in this time frame. We're talking the 90s. What superhero movies were a big success in the 90s?
Yeah, no one ever really talked about them. And during that time, a lot of people associated superhero movies, they're comic book nerds. We don't need to watch this. We don't want to be into that stuff. We're too hip, too cool.
Now, Blade is the first time it really made it cool to be into this kind of stuff. Now, a lot of people, again, did not realize it was based on a comic book, so a lot of people didn't see that.
Yeah, they're probably just like, oh, this is an action flick. This
Yeah.
is not associated with a comic book. It's cool.
Hmm.
Uh,
I didn't know it was a comic book till probably about like 5 or 6 years after I saw it.
Now, see, I was a
So-
little bit different because I knew he was a comic book character. Never read his comic or anything. I just knew that because of his appearances on the Spider-Man cartoon back in the '90s, which, by the way, is not very good. For some reason, they decided to give him a lightsaber instead of a sword. Anyway, but really, what really cemented comic books as a proven commodity in theaters had to be the first Spider-Man directed by Sam Raimi. Now, I'm a big Sam Raimi fan. I go back to The Evil Dead with Sam Raimi, so I was a big fan, and I was so happy that he was picked to be the director of the movie. I wasn't sure of how good he would do it, but I was like 12 when it came out, so I didn't really care.
Mm-hmm.
So now, have you guys seen Spider-Man? The first one back in like 2001.
Early 2000s. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of, like we watched like pieces of it. We didn't really get into Spider-Man. Not a huge Spider-Man fan.
Right. What about you?
I watched it in the theater, I watched the second and third one in the theater. The movies themselves are good movies, and I do like them, but as far as being through the comics, there's a lot of stuff they changed, which I could deal with, like him having the built-in webbing and all that stuff. It made okay sense, but the main thing I hated was in Spider-Man 3, that movie. I just, having Eric Foreman from that 70s show playing
That was
Eddie
pretty
Brock
disappointing.
it was like sacrilegious, okay? I hated it.
I seen all three in the theater. 2 being my favorite, just because a lot of the fights with Doc Ock was really exciting. It really felt like a comic book. 3 I thought was okay. Well, I think that's where we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking about, I guess, the X-Men movies. So, see you when we get back.